Welcome to Regulated and Relational, the bi-monthly podcast brought to you by the Attachment and Trauma Network. Today, Julie and Ginger are exploring the transformative power of empathy. Empathy is not just a personal virtue, but it is a vital, actionable skill that the world needs now more than ever. Let's listen in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Regulated and Relational, our podcast produced by the Attachment and Trauma Network. I'm Ginger Healy.
And I'm Julie Beem.
And we're excited to share with you from both our personal experiences and our professional knowledge what it truly means to be trauma-informed, attachment-focused, and how we can help children impacted by early childhood trauma.
So today we want to dive into a topic that touches us all. We want to talk about empathy. It is one of the most fundamental aspects of human connection, but it's often misunderstood. It's definitely underappreciated, and sometimes it's just plain hard to do, right? Some folks even vocalize that empathy is a sign of human weakness. We totally disagree. And in fact, we believe that now more than ever, there's a pressing need for an empathy revolution.
Yes, we do. Start off by talking about what empathy really is. According to the dictionary, empathy is defined as the action of understanding, being aware of, being sensitive to, and vicariously experiencing the feelings, thoughts, and experience of another without having the feelings or thoughts explicitly communicated.
Okay.
What that means is that empathy is feeling with someone, not just feeling sorry for them. It's the difference between offering pity from a distance or offering support because you truly understand someone's pain. I think it's easy to get empathy and sympathy confused with each other, but they're very different. Sympathy says, I feel bad for you. Empathy says, I feel with you. And Brene Brown, in her book, Atlas of the Heart, says it best. Empathy fuels connection. Sympathy drives disconnection. Brene also says that empathy is a crucial tool for compassion. She defines empathy as an emotional skill set that helps us understand and reflect on another person's experience. Empathy sparks compassion that motivates us to act, to help, and to connect. It's both an emotional and cognitive process. And it requires being present with someone's pain. It's not enough just to walk in their shoes. We hear that a lot, but true empathy means listening to their story and accepting it, even if it doesn't match your own experiences. And so I had to kind of sit with that a moment and really digest it. She's saying that phrase, walking in someone else's shoes, it's well-intentioned, but it can oversimplify or misrepresent someone else's unique experience. It's so true empathy, it's not just about imagining ourselves in someone else's place. We can't actually really imagine all scenarios. We haven't experienced all scenarios.
Right.
We can't actually fully understand every person's experience. There's no shame in that. What we can do is be present with them and listen deeply to them. We can seek to understand their emotions and perspectives, and most importantly, we can believe that. Even when that experience is different, maybe it doesn't make sense, it doesn't resonate. But that's the whole thing. When it is different, it doesn't mean it's not valid, not true. It's that we believe them. So instead of trying to replicate, walk in someone else's shoes, try to figure out and do what they've done, empathy just calls us to hold space for their truth with compassion and openness, right? Curiosity.
Right. Yeah. And as I'm thinking about that and thinking about Brene Brown, and this is one of the big things that she talks
Yeah.
about, is one of her big areas of research. It reminds me of that video that's just so illustrative. And maybe we
Yeah,
should attach that in the show notes
absolutely.
where the one little animal, I think it's a bear, somebody's down in a pit, but the bear like crawls down in the pit with them to illustrate that empathy of being present. You know, the bear hasn't been in that pit situation before, but just goes right there and holds space
Yeah.
for their friend and
Try to fix it. Yeah.
try to
It's
fix
just,
it. All of those things that is how we, how we best express empathy, right? How it best shows up and helps the
yeah.
other person. So it's if you haven't seen the video, it's a good one to click on and check out because it illustrates all of this way better than we can express
Yeah.
it in words, right?
Yeah.
So again, nobody's going to be surprised that we're all about relationships on this podcast. Empathy improves our relationships. The benefit is to us as much as it is to the other people that we're being empathetic, right? We can truly understand and relate to someone else's feelings. And when we do that, that just makes it easier for us to form stronger bonds with
Yeah.
that person and with other people, right? It reduces misunderstandings, it fosters mutual trust and better communication. When we empathize with others, we strengthen our own emotional connections and our own ability to trust. It's like building that trust muscle, right? It does, whether it's your friend or your family member or your coworker or even a stranger, it strengthens our connections with that person. There's Dr. Helen Rice, I think it's Rice and not Reese, it's Riess, is a psychiatrist and a researcher. And she's done extensive work demonstrating how empathy transforms doctor-patient relationships. Her research shows that when doctors truly empathize with their patients, it leads to better outcomes. Their patients are more cooperative and do what they tell them, and it even reduces the physician's own burnout.
I love this research. It is absolutely fascinating to me that empathy reduces physician burnout. Because don't you think that some people would argue, and I've probably thought myself to argue that empathy is hard and it's can be tiring and draining, whether it's I'm not saying it's a bad thing, it's just that it requires a lot. And so if you're thinking about a doctor, it would make sense to me that doctors should maybe keep a professional distance and protect their boundaries, right? Leave work at work so that they can do their job as professionals and not let feelings get in the way. But what this research is telling us is that dealing with someone rather than having pity from a distance that that person is hurt or injured, right? Having sympathy that that person is experiencing physical pain leads the physician to be able to do their job better and longer, have more perseverance, right, in the job. And well, I can see how if empathy makes I can see that that would make for more cooperative patients because if you really trust your doctor and
Yes.
have that
Exactly.
relationship, you're going to listen to them. You're going to
Mhm.
follow directions. You're going to put yourself in their hands, which, you need to do, right? And I can see how that would greatly help the physician do their job better. It's really goes back to that relationships and trust matter. It benefits both the patient and the doctor. And I love that Dr. Reese was able to prove better outcomes for both. That the physician can do their job better, like mind blown. I love that research.
Yes, that is great research. And I'm thinking through that because there are times that I would tell you that being holding space for people can be a tiring task. And I know
Mhm.
that because you're a licensed clinical social worker, so you've done your share of therapy, that is, it's a hard job being a therapist, holding space for people. But at the same time, having empathy for the people that you're working for, or the people that you're helping in some way, makes that helping job so much more enjoyable and meaningful and doable, right?
I couldn't agree more. There have been so many times where I have helped someone work through something really hard, and it took a lot out of me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet it energized me and filled me with joy and compassion and excitement to go to work the next day.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
So I think we have to have it, and then we also have to be aware of our own, how full our own tanks are, right?
Yeah, because boundaries aren't a bad thing. We're not saying that. It's being able to have both. It's that structure, nurture, compassion, and balancing. Yeah.
Right. And we're not just talking about healthcare or even social services, right? We're talking about empathy, especially in a world and a society now when people are talking negatively about empathy. We're talking about our government, our public policies. Empathy can guide the decisions that protect the people who are vulnerable. It can promote equity. Empathy can build bridges that bridge the divides. It can foster collaboration. It can promote mutual respect. Empathy has always been the driving force in creating a society that's more compassionate. And that, my friends, is an emotionally and physically healthy thing, right?
So good. So good. It reminds me when I was doing some research for my second book, I was really wanting to focus on how to help teachers so that they could better help their students. I wanted to focus on the adult nervous system because I was and still am really concerned for the mental and physical health of our educators, right? And for really any child serving professional. And I found that stress really absolutely impacts our physical health. And I don't necessarily think that's a surprise. In fact, we learned from the ACE study, how stress can affect our physical health, emotional health, our overall well-being. But what I really found enlightening was that people who are able to empathize have a stronger immune system.
Wow.
Which means that they experience fewer stress-related health issues. And so many health issues are absolutely stress-related. So empathy reduces stress, right? And that's not only good for physical health, but absolutely for mental health too. So when we empathize with others, we're able to process our emotions in a healthier way. It relieves these emotional burdens that we carry that lead to stress. So it gives us fewer negative feelings and ultimately just this greater sense of peace where we feel emotionally and physically safe. And that's what we're all searching for. That's what we all need. But without that empathy, we're more judgmental. We're more stressed out. We feel negative. We're irritable. It's just less happiness, less peace. So engaging with others empathetically helps us feel connected, less isolated, more fulfilled in life. It gives us this capacity to handle challenging situations. We can think more clearly, we can reason, reflect, and problem solve because we have more emotional awareness. So it's on a scientific level, absolutely beautiful.
Right. Such a great amount of benefits, right? But Ginger, sometimes
I know.
It's hard.
I agree.
Sometimes I don't have time. I don't want to. There's so many things. It's hard to be empathetic. And actually, for many of us, there are obstacles that get in the way. Nobody's going to be surprised by these obstacles. We've talked about them before, but they're still there.
Yeah.
The first is fear, right? Where fear puts us on the defense, right? We shut down, and when we're shut down by that fear, we know our brains, their brains can't do a whole lot, and they definitely can't empathize, right? And when we're afraid, we become protective of ourselves emotionally. So that's kind of the opposite of being able to hold space. I can't hold space for somebody else's pain if I'm afraid myself.
Right.
It's just not possible, right? And then there's the one that I'm guilty of, because and all of us are guilty of, and that's that buggy old judgment, right? That we judge others, and that our mind, I understand why our brains are judge. It's like a survival thing to keep us safe.
Yeah.
Who can we trust and who can we not trust, right? But when we go there, we immediately start judging the actions of the other people or their situation that they're in, and that judgment can block the empathy, because we can go down the path of, well, they made a wrong decision, or they sure handled that differently than I would have, and that blocks my ability to be empathetic to them, because I'm solving their problem in my head in my own way when I don't really understand what's going on, and I'm not holding space to be open to understanding. And sometimes we can just feel threatened by the other person's emotions. They're so big sometimes, and that's hard. And it takes practice for us to learn how to sit with somebody else's pain and not let that be painful to us. Not that make us feel so uncomfortable that we can't sit there, right? So whether it's our fear or our insecurities or our past experiences, and if we have past experiences that have made us feel these feelings, then sometimes it's too much for us, and we can't remain open in that situation. We're going to shut down because we're feeling threatened. So it's, all of those things can prevent us from connecting with other people with empathy.
Interesting. I'm just sitting here thinking about that insecurity piece. I see it all the time. I fall into that all the time. Just, I think being aware of that is huge. So
Right.
women in that. Okay. Well, I think I would like to dig a little bit deeper here about how empathy can get blocked by othering. I think that's a big
good.
thing that
Let's talk about
we
that.
need to talk about. Othering is the act of treating someone as though they're not a part of the group, or that they're different in some way. And chances are we've done it to others and it's been done to us. And maybe it's not on purpose, right? Or done intentionally, but at the core, it's judgment driven and surrounded by fear. And it has a really powerful impact of shutting down empathy. It's really hard to feel with someone when you're not willing to bring them in, right? Because you want them on the outside of your circle. Then how can you feel with them, or if you're setting that putting up that wall.
Right. Yeah. And this reminds me of something I read recently. It was a sermon that was given by the late Rabbi Jonathan Sacks, and I want to summarize what he had to say, because I think it really applies here. Reverend Sacks was the chief rabbi of the UK, and he gave a sermon on this topic to the Jewish community during Passover in the United Kingdom. And here's some quotes from that. If there's one command above all others that speaks to the power and significance of empathy, it is this line in Exodus: "You shall not oppress a stranger, for you know the heart of a stranger. You were strangers in the land of Egypt." So then the rabbi goes on to ask why this command, like, why are we talking about empathy to strangers? Because empathy extends beyond strangers. I mean, it applies to our marriage partners, our parents, our children, our dear friends, our neighbors, our colleagues at work. Why is it essential that it's essential for everybody, empathy is, then why are we zeroing in on this and evoking it specifically about strangers? And the answer is that empathy is strongest in groups where people identify with each other in their families, their friends, their clubs, their religions, their races and cultures. So the corollary to this is that the stronger your bond within the group, the sharper the suspicion and fear of the people who are outside the group, right? It's easy to love your neighbor as yourself when your neighbor is inside of your group, inside of your social circle,
yes.
right?
Yeah.
That's an easy thing to do. It's
right.
very much harder, indeed, to love somebody that's outside of your group, that is a stranger, right? And even it's even hard to feel empathy for them, right?
Yeah, makes sense.
Rabbi Sachs, that this is the direct quote from him, and it's powerful. He says, "Fear of the one not like us is capable of disabling the empathy response. That is why this specific command is so life-changing. Not only does it tell us to empathize with the stranger because you know what it feels like to be in his or her place, but it even hints that part of the purpose of the Israelites being exiled into Egypt was, in the first place, it was as if God said, your sufferings have taught you something of immense importance. To remember the heart of the stranger is so radical, right? But it's so relevant today." Those words really spoke to me because it was like yes, it is radical to think about, okay, all of the times that I have felt exiled or on the outside, and draw that up to then be able to open myself to somebody who is different than me, who is a stranger to me. And that's so important, right? That's so important, and in today's society, especially.
Yeah. As relevant as ever. Yeah, that's so good. I want to shift us a little bit in talking about like how can we teach this to children? Because I was reading recently, Dr. Tina Payne Bryson has a new book. It's called The Way of Play. She co-wrote it with Georgia Weiss and Vincent, and she talks specifically about how to develop empathy, that it is a skill that we can teach, we can model, and that actually we should overtly teach this. And so she gives ideas how to do that. And the first thing she says is talk about it, use basic terminology around empathy with children, openly model, like bring it fully out into the light. And she talks about two different kinds of empathy, and that modeling each of them will build empathic skills in children. So the first type that she talks about is cognitive empathy, which is that ability to understand what someone else might be thinking or what they might be feeling. It's like essentially taking their perspective, looking through their lens. And so she says you can teach this to children by noticing and reflecting out loud what's going on for another person. So, for example, she looks sad. I wonder if she's feeling left out. Those I wonder statements, getting curious, right? And just modeling that out loud. And then she talks about the second type of empathy being affective empathy. And that's going beyond basic understanding and actually feeling with someone, even from a distance, right? Sharing their emotional experience, like even looking when you're watching something sad on the television, you can feel that, right?
Yeah.
And so how could you model that to children? And she says, don't hide your feelings. If you're sad and you're crying, cry, right? Cry in front of your children, voice it. I feel sad because someone got hurt, someone experienced someone sad, or I feel happy, right? Model that. Something happened for someone else and I feel happy for them. So easy,
that's
great
powerful.
ways to do that, right? I also want to put in a little caveat plug here when we're talking about neurodivergent kids. Those are kids with processing differences. And so that might be harder to try to interpret facial expressions or body language. That can oftentimes, with neurodivergence, feel confusing, maybe feel overwhelming, or feel inauthentic. So we can help them learn empathy by encouraging them to tune into their own inner experience, asking questions like, how does it feel inside? What do you notice? Does this feel like a hard moment or an okay moment? What do you do when you feel upset? What helps you? Just kind of reflecting on how they feel, building that inner self-awareness. That's a key building block for empathy with others. And so you can do that without causing children to feel like they have to comply or follow directions or mask.
Mhm.
With when children are supported and in recognizing their own emotions and the emotions of others in ways that feel safe or authentic, that builds that path to empathy. So there's just different ways to do this. And for neurodivergent kids, it's not about performing empathy or trying to fit in a mold that looks like certain manners, like looking in the eyes. We don't have to do
Right.
that. It's about, just deepening their authentic connection to emotion in whatever way makes sense for them. So
Mhm. Right.
I think,
Right. Yeah. And I think that's good. That's even good advice to teach really young children, even neurotypical children,
absolutely.
to get in touch with their emotions,
Yeah.
first, so that they can then use that to understand the emotions of others. Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, we're not just talking about developing empathy in children. It's never too late for us to get better at it as adults, right? And now's the time to cultivate the empathy intentionally in ourselves. Empathy doesn't have to look or sound a certain way. It doesn't have to be the bear crawling down in the hole. It can be a variety of other things. For some people, empathy is just being there in a quiet presence. For others, it's often action. It's often gifts of service or support or doing things that shows their empathy. Some folks show empathy in their words. We express our care in different ways. Each of those ways is valid and important and speaks to who we are, but also, can impact the person that we're empathizing with in so many great ways, right?
Yeah.
Here are a few steps if you're trying to build your empathy muscle, and you should be. I'm trying to build mine. Be real about your own emotions. And ouch, that takes a minute to think about, right? So to understand others, you first have to understand yourself. And I would like to say that I acknowledge my own feelings all the time, but that's not true. I don't, right? I just don't. Whether it's anger, sadness, frustration, sometimes I just go through my day letting all of those emotions just like roam around in there, and I don't process them. And then that's just it. First of all, that's a big mistake because I know how much it impedes my own health, physical and mental. But you have to get real about this. This emotional awareness opens us up to having more empathy for others, because you just, when you look at another human being, you're like, well, they're feeling all that swirl of stuff inside of them too. Surprise, surprise. Right.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, I was working with a group of superintendents up in Canada, and
Mhm.
one of them said, I get paid to not lose it, to not,
Yeah,
you
true.
know, trying to kind of say, how can we build our empathy muscle? How can we, you know, express our emotion? I was teaching them how to complete the stress cycle. And one of the ways is to like name it to tame it, and
Yep.
to cry and to show affection. And there's just so many good ways. And he's like, it's hard. I get paid not to lose it.
Right.
But then he said, but I go home and I have my wife and we talk it out. And I was like, okay,
Yeah, you're
so
processing it, right? Yeah.
yeah,
Because sometimes I'm so
yeah,
busy with my life, I don't take the time to process it, right? And
yeah,
then days go by and I'm feeling disengaged and sluggish and maybe grumpy or angry or whatever. And you have to get curious with yourself and say,
yeah,
what's going on here, right? And what's
yeah,
making me feel this way? And usually I can go right back to, well, I'm really sad about this, or I'm really frustrated about this. And you know and Tina Payne Bryson and Dan Siegel are right. Once you name it, it does take power out of it. It
yeah,
does name it. Once you're able to say to yourself, this is the core of what I'm frustrated about right now, or angry, or sad, or overwhelmed, or whatever. And then it's not nearly as powerful.
well,
Okay.
and especially in a big job like a superintendent, you're gonna have overwhelm, you're gonna have frustration, you're gonna have anger. That's okay. Those feelings aren't bad. Those are very human. So we're not saying don't have those feelings. It's that, yeah,
Yes.
gotta
Right.
real and process. So
Right. And
anyway.
there's a time and place. And as this, as
Mhm.
the leader, a lot of times you have to tell yourself, not right now. I have to continue to operate through this. I have to continue to make the decisions I need to make. But at some point, you have to
Yeah.
acknowledge them, or you
Yeah.
do put yourself in that risk of burning yourself
I agree.
emotionally, right? So another thing is that you need to challenge your own biases. It's great
Mm.
practice um, to practice empathy, right? To try to get somebody's perspective that's different from your own, to ask the questions. I wonder what makes them think and act that way, right? Especially if it's radically different from the way that you think or act or interact with others. And especially people who are in an entirely different place than you are. They look different, they act different, they think different. Um, you know, be curious about that and challenge yourself. Am I judging them? Am I shutting this down because of my own bias that they should do something some way? When that should word shows up for me is when it's a flag. I'm like, if I'm thinking, well, they should, then I stop myself. It's like, wait, who am I to say they should? And let's rethink this a little bit.
So yeah.
That equally important is that you do then have to forgive yourself, right? And forgive yourself for that, and forgive others. That holding grudges or the judgments, those, we already talked about how judgment gets in the way of empathy. But if there's forgiveness that's needed there, either forgiving yourself for a situation with somebody or forgiving them, there's no way you're going to get to empathy in that relationship if you're not able to work through that as a forgiveness type situation.
So
Right?
true. So true.
And then this is one of my favorites because we don't do this very often, and I'm still a student of it. I still got to do it, and that's to practice active listening, right? When it's really hard, especially as fast as our lives are, to not just listen to be able to respond, but to actually stop what our minds are doing and actively listen to what the other person is saying. And you pick up so much more that way because you're picking up all their body language and their intonation and everything. And it's in that listening that we can start to build that empathy, because we're focusing on understanding what they're trying to communicate, right? Their true experience. If we avoid the distractions and we give them our full attention, and we don't interrupt them or jump in and try to fix their problem real quick so that we can move on, right? Because we're all guilty of that. Then that's active listening, and that itself is it's like it's teeing our golf ball up for to play empathy, right? We're there if we're actively listening. And it's hard to do. We have to make the time and be intentional to do it, but it's so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Rather than, sometimes when I'm listening, I'm thinking, oh, I have something to add to that. Or it ends up hijacking
Yeah.
and
Even
it's
jumping in with my own similar
me
experience does
too.
that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, I went there too, as they're telling me, but it's not about that. Yeah, so good. Because then I'm not listening to them. I'm only thinking about, well, I want to be heard too. I want to be
My
seen
own
too.
experience of that.
I
Right.
own.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a time and place for sharing
Yeah.
that peer-to-peer story about it, but letting that person express themselves completely is hugely important, because you also then get to hear exactly their emotion, which may not have been the same as your own. You may have been
So,
sad, but they may be angry, that type of thing.
yeah,
So
I really want to work on that one too.
yeah, me
So
too. I'm a student by all means. I have not perfected that. And finally, we all need to be more compassionate with ourselves. We cannot practice empathy with others if we're not compassionate with ourselves. If we're, we have to be kind. We acknowledge our own emotions and give ourselves the same care that we would offer a friend. And that too is really hard. I think that's harder than giving care to friends personally.
mm,
It really is.
yeah, yeah, so good, so good. I want to share this story that I read about, and it has just really stuck with me, and I think it's really relevant. There was an archaeological dig in Vietnam, and researchers discovered the 4,000-year-old remains of a young man who had a severe congenital condition
Mm,
4,000 years ago. So the archaeologists were able to see that this spine of this young man, it had been fused since childhood, and that left him paralyzed from the waist down. So, but despite that disability, he lived into his 20s, and 4,000 years ago, that is far beyond what would have been expected, a life expectancy for someone who had a fused spine and was paralyzed. They wouldn't have had the knowledge, right? The environmental support, physical support, healthcare. I don't know if
right.
healthcare was available 4,000 years ago,
Yeah.
but
No
definitely
urgent
not
cares out there for sure.
not what we have now.
Right.
So what that means is that that young man's survival
Hmm.
meant that his community had to feed him, clean him, protect him,
Hmm.
and care for him for many years, right? And
Right.
this isn't just about like physical caregiving, it's like a clear example of human empathy in action. His tribe had to imagine his suffering, feel it, and they chose to respond with consistent, repeated compassion.
Hmm.
And it's just a powerful illustration of empathy.
Hmm.
That ability to feel with another and respond accordingly. I love that that has deep roots in our evolutionary history.
Yes.
It's right. It's not just about morals. It's like a foundational part of what makes us human, because he kept that young man alive. Empathy built that community.
Mhm.
Empathy made civilization possible, even in the Stone Age.
Yeah, that is really powerful. And it speaks to why why we need to not only know about this, but believe in this, about how vital empathy is to us in a broader social context throughout our culture, right?
Yeah.
Empathy isn't
Yeah.
just for being empathetic to people who are like us. It's especially for being empathetic to people who are unlike us, the people on the margins, the stranger, the vulnerable, like you just talked about. And that, of course, was the point that Rabbi Sachs was making too, right? And this is, yeah, this is where we are. We're living in a world right now that increasingly needs more empathy, even while we've got a lot of voices telling us that we don't. We
Yeah.
recognize there are active forces out there that are trying to stoke the fear, stoke the division, other everybody. These people are not like you, and therefore are not worthy of your empathy. But that's not true. Empathy is the counterbalance. It's also a little bit revolutionary, right? to have empathy towards the people who aren't like me, the immigrants, towards children, towards elderly, towards people with disabilities, towards people who are different than me in their beliefs, in their cultures, in the way that they express themselves. We need to get better at sitting with the strangers, the people who are different from us, and the pain that isn't our own.
Ooh.
Yeah. Instead of rushing to defend or fix it or say, yeah, it's really not that painful, dismiss it in some way, we need to just be present and observe it and hold space for it. Empathy is not about perfection or performing emotional sensitivity. It's about that presence. It's about showing up and putting forth an effort and caring for someone, even when you don't totally understand their experiences. And I can say that you don't have to be a stranger for me not to totally understand your experience. I just need to show up and decide that it's not important for me to understand. It's important for me to be there and to relate to you in some way. Because empathy is something that it truly lives in all of us, and we can grow it as a skill, and we can express it in a multitude of beautiful, diverse ways.
Yeah. It is a power,
Mm-hmm.
and we all have access to it. And like you said, we can learn and practice, we can refine it. I love that. And in a world that feels divided, practicing empathy is one of the most important steps that we can take to create a more connected and compassionate world. And there is an obligation to care for others. I feel that so deeply.
Me too.
Strangers, the marginalized, it's critical. It's critical because they're often the very ones who aren't a part of the community and don't know how to navigate systems or connect with the right people.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, what we learned from Rabbi Sachs. He says, merely thinking about others is hardly sufficient. Active empathy is life-changing, not only for you, for the people with whom you interact. We all have that obligation to tend to the stranger, to alleviate his or her suffering, and to oppose the abuse of power.
For sure. So we're wrapping this up. Here's the challenge for all of you, and for me and Ginger too. We're all taking this challenge. Let's be a part of this empathy revolution. Let's learn more, let's practice it regularly, and let's recognize our obligation to alleviate suffering through the power of empathy. Let's do it, Ginger.
Done.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Regulated and Relational. In our next episode, Julie and Ginger explore what it means to stock, savor, and sustain joy. A special thanks to Joe Kramer for donating the music. To learn more about the Attachment and Trauma Network, visit us at www.attachedtrauma.org. I'm Lauren Cassis, and as always, thank you for listening.